For Sunday, October 16th, you found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, the school fight dominates your television airwaves. There's a new top cop in Georgia, and black and brown on the campaign trail. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us. Our focus today is almost entirely on the upcoming election. We're just 4 weeks out. And it's interesting to me anyway that we're not really talking about Johnny Isakson versus Jim Barksdale for the U.S. Senate. We're talking, of course, about the presidential election. But in the state of Georgia, the real topic of conversation, to my surprise, is the constitutional amendment to reform our schools. And there on television are huge buys from forces who oppose it, mainly national organizations such as the Teachers Union, and a pretty good bit of money raised by Governor Nathan Deal to try to be competitive in the airwaves on TV. And the discerning viewer should notice a lot of misinformation. And Phil, I want to start with you on this. Wall Street, for-profit, taking away funds from local school districts, and lack of parental control. Those seem to be the main objections. Not one of them's true, is it?
Well, that's right. Those are some myths that need to be punctured. I know we got talking about it last week, but if I could just make a couple points here. You've got already almost 68,000 kids we know currently in these failing schools. To your point on for-profits or non-profits, when we're talking charter schools, which that could be one alternative for schools, and these charter schools are pretty popular. Most charters are non-profit. You're not going to have for-profit schools.
I don't think they're allowed.
That's right.
And if you read, not true.
No, if you read the enabling legislation,
it rules out for-profits.
It rules it out, and I wanted to correct that because that's been some misinformation that's been out there, and really and truly, and I would appeal to my colleagues here on the panel. The number was startling. Not just the 68,000 that are currently in these failing schools that can't get out. And this amendment, of course, would provide a mechanism to even close some of these schools if necessary. Well, no teachers would lose their job. I think that's important.
Very important. That's
very important.
Well, they could, though.
No, they couldn't.
No,
the principal could be fired, yes.
Demoted.
Demoted or fired, as I understand it. But no teacher would lose their jobs, and that's another myth that I wanted to kind of puncture today. I read the enabling legislation. Before every constitutional amendment, there's enabling legislation. I would urge viewers to actually do some homework on that.
I found it on the Secretary of State's website.
Yeah.
And I did too.
Yeah.
And Jeff, I want to stick this right to you, and I mean that a good way, because you were adamant in your opposition to this. But because we're both benighted taxpayers of DeKalb County, when you look at the number of failing schools, the focus has been on Atlanta. But the situation in DeKalb is just perilous. Not only does DeKalb have this huge number of schools that are not performing, that's defined as 3 years of bad performance.
That's right.
DeKalb's got a whole bunch of other schools, a whole bunch, where they've only had 2 years of failing
They're
performance.
on probationary status.
A few schools have come off, a high school and a couple of them. But Jeff, something has to be done, and I don't think the traditional school board mechanism, especially in DeKalb, is capable of doing what needs to be done, which is drastically changing the way low-income children are educated.
Well, you know, and I'm glad that you hit on that, because what we're looking at is really not a matter of whether it's DeKalb or APS or Clayton. What we're looking at is a racial issue. We're looking at underperformance and it's low income and it's racial, right?
It's
and
generations
it's that population.
of poverty.
It's generations of poverty. It's intergenerational. It's been going on for a long time in Georgia. As we've acknowledged on this program, it is a result of de jure segregation, generation after generation after generation, and here's where we are. Is a charter school an option? Should it be? We should explore every conceivable option to get these children out of where they are right now. I believe that. I think that it does. And, you know, you got to give the governor some credit for saying we're stuck. what can we do to get unstuck? And I think that this is one of those. And we've seen the same thing with Governor Deal when it comes to criminal justice reform and locking all of these people up and the high cost, the social cost, the human cost.
Are you saying you might vote yes, Jeff?
I'm saying that we need to have some options. I just don't know that putting it back in the hands of the people who, not the people, but the institutions that caused the problem in the first place
I don't
is
think
the
it
answer,
does. But I don't think it does. Alexis, for example, your city of Atlanta, Maria Karstarfin, the superintendent there, saw this coming, and I thought brilliantly moved to hire one of the governor's top aides and to try to anticipate what these school takeovers might look like. And she's implemented several charters. It's way too early to report on how they're doing.
And closed some schools.
And she closed some schools. And I think that's to her credit.
Well, and I think that should be to the credit of each local district to do what needs to be done in their locations rather than having the state take over.
But they will.
Well, they won't. The state will hire a superintendent to run this program, and that person will be only answerable to the governor, not to the local community. And I think it just is not the appropriate way to address the problem. Clearly something needs to be done, and things have been done. And one of the things, though, that has exacerbated the problem is No Child Left Behind, because since that went into effect, people have been teaching to the test, and then it begat the teacher cheating scandal.
True, but that's been amended, if not revoked.
Well, I'm just saying, though, that it has caused people to take their eye off the ball of education and teaching children how to think, how to discern, and how to be
You know, one other thing about this that I found interesting in reading the legislation, you know, a lot of these commercials say that it takes control away from the local school board and the parents. Well, each one of these schools that is the subject of a state takeover is required to have a parental council that includes outsiders, but it's mainly parents.
That's
so
right.
And don't you think that if you go to the average
PTA, and I'm just telling you, in communities that are majority poverty ridden and intergenerational poverty, the parents are either working or don't have the involvement that needs to be there. And that's part of the problem. The resources need to go to these families to assist them. The studies have shown that children come to school with a 3 million word deficit, and they can't perform, and the time is spent on so-called discipline because the children cannot communicate.
The point is to get them out of these failing schools.
Where are you going to put them? Where are you going to put them?
They're going to be
I
going
think it's more
to
like
the same
reform in the
school?
failing schools.
No.
They're going to take them physically away?
No, they're either going to close the schools and get them to better performing schools where they can, especially in elementary schools, where they can start reading. And charter schools have become popular. Polling shows they're very popular with the minority population.
One of the things that I think that we've acknowledged and that we've seen just in the run-up to the possibility that the law may pass is school systems redoubling their efforts to improve those schools that are at the bottom.
Right.
And if it does nothing more than that, it's probably a good thing.
But these
that
schools on the list, Jeff, aren't improving.
It's forcing districts to do everything that they can to lift these schools up to a level where they ought to be. But here's a problem that I have with this entire discussion. We keep talking about failing schools and failing principals and failing teachers, and I don't think that's where the problem lies.
No,
I really don't. I think that it's familial. I think that it's a problem in the family, and until we get there, like Alexis is saying, you come to school with this deficit, you come to school, you got a 6-year-old who doesn't know how to read, hadn't been exposed to any books, up against another 6-year-old.
We all agree with that. Let me just make the point, though, Jeff. Your 127 schools that we're talking about right now that continually fail year after year. Statewide. I mean, they are not improving. That's the problem.
No,
So
but look, what I'm trying to say is that there is a certain demographic in that school district. There's a certain demographic in that school, and we end up saying that the school is failing. If you were to send kids to that school who had some parental support and were reading at home and doing homework at home, those wouldn't necessarily be failing schools.
Exactly.
Okay, but we don't have that, and we've got to have the teachers be teaching reading.
So we've got to direct our efforts to where the problem is.
So that's what the amendment does. That's why you should vote yes.
We got to get out.
Your point about minorities supporting charter schools, I'm not saying it's not. It's about economics, socioeconomics. It's children in poverty who are suffering. and not all minorities are in poverty.
But you do agree that charter schools, by and large, have been helping minority students, all students.
We got to get out.
You would agree with that, wouldn't you?
I think
The evidence is there.
I don't think it is. I think
Okay.
it's mixed evidence.
We're going to have to
It
agree
is
to
mixed.
disagree.
It is mixed. But New Orleans, for example, is one of the great success stories
That's
ever.
right.
We got more time to talk about this in the
Everybody
coming
moved to
weeks.
Houston and
Can I
Atlanta.
make a point? We all know
Quickly.
your hero, James Carville, the Democratic consultant. He is in favor of this type of rescue of
Because he
failed.
moved to New Orleans to
He
teach at
moved to New
Tulane.
Orleans, and he's in favor of this type of student rescue.
Good for him.
And finally, I found a short way of expressing what you folks have been saying for years.
What's that?
And I'm going to use it. Now, it sounds a bit irreverent, but it's true.
Okay.
I think I found it on Theron Johnson's Facebook page, by the way. It's a simple statement. Mama can't read, baby can't read. There's your intergenerational poverty. And that's what I hope this plan will attack. There are other amendments on the ballot. We're going to get to them in the next 4 weeks, maybe even today. But coming up next, a new top law enforcement officer for the state of Georgia. We'll discuss it when we return.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Our next report is not new to Georgia Gang viewers. We told you, of course, weeks ago that Sam Olens, the Attorney General, was going to go to Kennesaw State as president. And we suggested just a few weeks ago that Chris Carr, the state's Commissioner of Economic Development, would be the new Attorney General. And late this week, Chris Carr was named the new Attorney General. He takes over this coming week. There's a lot of politics involved, but they're kind of far down the road. I thought maybe it would be interesting to discuss what Chris Carr has on his plate. You know, he's 44 years old. He's not really a practicing attorney. He's an attorney in good standing and all that. But notice the confluence of events. This fall, this month perhaps, the Water Wars trial goes into federal court in Portland, Maine. You ask why Portland, Maine? Well, because the arbiter in that case,
special master.
Special master, is that what it is? He's a resident of Portland. He doesn't want to travel, so they're going to him. So here's Chris Carr, young guy taking over this department. And the AJC reported this week that the economic impact to the state of Georgia, if we lose the water wars, is $18 billion. Good luck, Chris. Right?
That's a shocker. And just a point on Chris Carr, of course, as Economic Development Commissioner, he's very well aware of the water wars. He, of course, was a former top chief of staff to our Senator Johnny Isakson,
who's fought the water wars.
The water wars on our behalf. And of course, as we all, I think, have agreed, that the other states are trying to steal our water, and it's so important, and it doesn't get the publicity it deserves. So, but the Attorney General, as we all know, they manage the other attorneys.
They don't try
on the
cases.
staff. And so they could, like Mike Bowers.
Mike Bowers did occasionally. Did Thurman Baker ever try a case? I don't recall.
You know, not only
I just don't recall.
But he's a manager, and he's been a tested and proven manager.
Administrative position, political appointee.
Yeah, and a lot of these cases, particularly some of the more complicated litigation, complex litigation, is handled by outside lawyers anyway, external lawyers, who are contracted through. And so, it's not a matter of whether or not Chris Carr is a practicing trial attorney, I don't think, so much as whether or not he can be an effective manager of that office. And there is every indication that he can.
So now in Little Dunwoody, we have the Attorney General in one neighborhood and David Namias of the Supreme Court of Georgia just down the street.
Look at that.
We could have the laws all solved right there, couldn't we?
Let me make a quick mention, too, Dick, if I may. Of course, Economic Development Commissioner is a very important position, and Pat Wilson, who is very qualified, has now taken over that slot.
He was
and he's been there. I think he started when Craig Lesser was Economic Commissioner and knows the whole ins and outs.
Changing the subject, there isn't a lot of local news. It evaporates when election time comes around. But let me begin with you, Jeff, again, not picking on you because I'm in the same boat. Did the county install a smart water meter at your house?
No.
They did at my house.
Did they? How smart is it?
I don't think it works.
You don't think it works?
I don't have outrageous bills, but they don't seem right to me.
Really?
So you notice this
higher
week,
or lower?
Higher, of course. They're smart. So they're not going to make it lower, are they? And then I don't think they completed the installation, to tell you the truth. But I don't know. I'm not an expert in that sort of thing. But I'm comforted by the fact that, there are no more water cutoffs. There's a moratorium on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And now the county's going to spend a bunch of money to stop with the smart meters and figure out what's going on with them. You saw how many people turned out to
Well, they're
complain
being
about
installed in all sorts of counties. It's not just
Well, DeKalb's called a halt to it for now. In Gwinnett County, 200 policemen getting pay raises of up to 6%. That's a virus that's spreading, and a good one.
a good one.
Governor Deal started that with the raises for highway patrol folks and others. And in your county, Fulton County, 17 million large for new IT.
That's right.
Right? I mean,
we've had
you're
so
going to be
many problems
computerized.
in Fulton County. We've had problems with our IT department for years, so thank goodness.
All
But I
right.
think it's good that they're going to get the latest and the greatest. That's what they need to do.
Finally.
And a final note, you know, we talked, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, we discussed these myriad lawsuits against the state over election, quote, irregularities, voter suppression, all that. I noticed Jesse Jackson was talking some of that nonsense at Morehouse this week. A record number of registered voters in Georgia, thanks to the electronic outreach of the Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. Record number. Plus, we know that black voters are voting in larger numbers than ever before, and in larger numbers than whites, percentage of turnout in Georgia.
Since 2008.
What's the problem?
What's the problem? Well, I think the problem was that the Secretary of State was trying to knock a bunch of people out of the system.
If they did, that's fine.
No, it's not.
No,
If they
it
weren't
isn't.
eligible.
It
If they
isn't.
did.
And when you
Well,
have these
it's
kinds
like-
of snafus where you've got, you know, I think there was a weekend recently where they had some software issues and those kinds of things. You know, when it was happening with Obamacare in the early going, you know, it was a national catastrophe.
Well, that was $1 billion failure.
We ought to have computer systems and obviously registration and election systems that actually work.
You can't
where people-
compare a $1
and you don't have to
billion
go
computer
back
failure
and you
to
don't go back.
Georgia.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the point is, and I think that you will, hopefully you will accept the point, you ought not have to tell people you got to go back and re-register because we might not have gotten your registration,
Well,
as has
that's not
happened
good.
repeatedly.
Right.
All right, we got to get out. We got to get out. When we come back, we're going to talk about something called a black and brown tour. And I want to ask my colleagues, who look to me to be tan, are you included?
Yes, definitely.
We'll discuss that when we come back. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Now to the electoral politics of the moment. Johnny Isakson, running for U.S. Senate, has changed his campaign strategy a bit, going on the air with commercials that attack his opponent, Jim Barksdale, he of the infamous CAP. And Phil, that sends a signal, I think, to folks like us that Isakson is not where he wants to be in terms of getting 50% plus one. He does not want a 9-week runoff.
You don't want to
Well, that's right. You know, there is an odd Georgia law that would have to have a runoff. He has to get 50 plus one, Senator Isakson, the incumbent, against, and that would be in January, a long campaign. So
Yeah, Merry
Johnny
Christmas.
Isakson joked, I saw him the other day, he said, I want to save everybody some money. Vote for me now. And but I do think
Well,
that
he'd be asking
Barksdale,
for some large Christmas presents.
well, he would be. Barksdale made a big mistake, even with Georgia Democrats, and he totally attacks capitalism, the free enterprise system,
How
the
he made his
profit
money.
motive, how he made as a hypocrite to boot. And you know, that's a bridge too far for a lot of Georgia Democrats who do appreciate private enterprise.
Well, I was okay this
Goodness.
week when Barksdale hired a new staff, most of them socialists from the Bernie Sanders campaign. And the first thing I see from the new staff, it just floored me, is a black and brown tour, which happened to open in Norcross. I don't think of Norcross as particularly black or brown or white or anything else.
It's getting pretty
Am
brown.
I right to be offended by a major party candidate conducting a black and brown tour? What about tan? What about white? What about Native Americans like me?
Well, let's see. Where
You're a
shall I
Native American?
start?
I was born here.
Okay, where to start with that? I think what they're targeting people of color because that's where the votes are in the Democratic Party, and so that's why they're doing it.
So no whites, you know,
I think
not,
that
not an issue.
You know, I think that you
Whites-
can learn. You go out, you go to African American communities, you go to Hispanic communities, you find out what people's problems are, what their issues are, what's important to them. Maybe it's education. We've been talking about education. Maybe it's crime. Maybe it's starting a small business. I mean, I don't think that you trivialize it. You got segments of the population generation who have some serious concerns, and they need to be
Why
met.
not go
And
everywhere?
the fact of the
Go
matter is,
everywhere.
when you're a millionaire, right, and you live in your little bubble, as a lot of millionaires do, it's important that you go out and have these tours. I think maybe some of our Republicans ought to be doing it. Maybe some need to do it a little bit more, and they wouldn't be struggling in some of these concepts.
They're almost always ridiculed when they do, by the way.
Well,
it's always considered pandering.
I think you need to go. A candidate needs to go everywhere, and it's a shame that we're balkanizing
But
these
don't give it a
so-called-
name.
Please,
That's
come on.
what offends me is giving it a name.
Well,
We
yeah.
all understand where the votes are going to come from for Jim
Right.
Barksdale.
Right, and I think that also maybe reflects the first-time nature of his entry into politics.
I don't have to say this, but just imagine if a candidate for statewide office, a white guy, conducted a white tour.
Well,
or a
most
white
of them do.
contingent.
They do it all the
Well, that's
time.
ridiculous.
They do it all
They
the
go
time.
with
They go everywhere.
What do you think a Trump rally is?
They go everywhere.
Exactly.
I don't know. They've got
You're going to
some.
be upset to see a lot of blacks at these Trump rallies.
Now let's turn this.
I'm not going
let's
to be.
turn the page
I'm
to
not going to
Trump.
be
I will be
upset.
upset to see anybody at these Trump
Turning the
rallies.
page to Trump, our Matt Towery says that Trump has a lead of about 47-42 over Hillary Clinton in Georgia. Is that a fair number, Phil?
That's a fair number. And also Rasmussen, just this past Friday, said that he's up 6 points in Georgia. So all this nonsense.
And up nationally, Trump up nationally.
He's up nationally by 2 as of Friday.
But Rasmussen he's an outlier on that.
Yes.
That is true.
certainly not.
But the
Yeah.
point is this is a
Please.
very competitive race, and anyone who doesn't think so is wrong.
Well,
let me see. He has about an 11% chance of being elected president of the United States.
Who says that?
That's
Is
the
that
Nate
538?
Everybody
Oh,
says
come on,
that.
come
Hillary
on.
Clinton has an 89% chance. All you have to do is look at the electoral map, Phil. I
She's
mean,
getting busy.
stop. And
Hey.
not only that, did you not see what happened the last week? Do you realize that women are 53% of the national electorate and that they actually have TVs and can read newspapers? And they see
polls-
what's happening in front of them?
these
Did you
polls-
see Jessica Leeds on television?
Are you through?
Of the last couple of days?
Let me know when I can speak.
Well,
Please
here-
go right
Because-
ahead.
Because obviously it is a
Speak
tough
quickly.
climb with the Electoral College, 270. But it's competitive, is my
Well,
point.
the point-
And the polls that we've just cited don't show that there's been much of a dent. I do say the Libertarian may be rising a little bit in some of these states.
well, let's hope not.
Well, no, the
Out of
Libertarian
despair.
is rising a little bit because you've got so many Republicans, many of them who are top donors, now supporting the Libertarian
their
ticket
money back.
because they
Hillary
cannot
people.
support Trump.
That's
You've got a lot of Hillary
Well, and the
people
Gotta get out.
who
point
don't
is-
like
You
her
know,
corruption and lies that are going Libertarian.
what we've got in this national race right now, I think, is a lot of noise, a lot of tabloid noise. I mean, I wish
It's
that it wasn't
ridiculous.
there.
That's
It
my
is
point.
ridiculous, and it's ridiculous to this extent. This individual has no chance of being president of the United States,
Oh,
and we
that's-
ought to
it's
count our
overstated.
blessings.
Well,
that that's
it's not
true.
overstated.
That's just
You gotta get out.
Well, the thing
Hillary
I would say is
Clinton
that
has
the
to answer
electorate
for
has
her
been
corruption.
the electorate has been divided since the beginning of this century, right?
Yep.
Roughly half
Yep.
Republican and half Democrat, and that's the way it is.
Okay.
But the Democrats are going to prevail this
Well,
time.
the
And I would
Independents are
agree
gonna
with you
tell
on
the
the odds
story.
now, but I just want the last word on two things. Hillary Clinton is supposedly measuring the drapes in the Oval Office. I would settle for her returning the china and the furniture she stole when she and Bill Clinton left the White House
gee.
in 1998, right? And the other thing is, I don't want a presidential campaign based on beauty queens and descriptions of domestic house pets. I really don't want that.
No, we
so
don't.
when we
Well,
come
your
back,
candidate
winners
has
and
brought us
losers.
that.
Huh?
Your candidate has brought all that.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we'll begin winners and losers with flip a coin. You, Phil.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to talk about some of the winners that we discussed a little earlier, and that is Sam Owens getting to be president of Kennesaw State University, Chris Carr, of course, becoming the new Attorney General, Pat Wilson, the new Economic Development Commissioner, and someone we didn't mention, and we ought to, is Steve Wrigley, who is now the new University System of Georgia Chancellor. He's going to be replacing Hank Huckabee, so I
that
think that's a
permanent?
great choice. Yes,
that permanent?
Yes, he's now named permanent.
Okay.
The regents voted, and I'm going to make that Amendment 1 we discussed in the first portion of the broadcast a winner. I hope it wins on November 2nd to get those kids out of those
And
failing
we'll do the
schools.
other three as the program goes on in the coming weeks. Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to start with Ronald Johnson. He was inaugurated as the new president, the 4th president of Clark Atlanta University. He came from Texas Southern, where he was the dean of the business school there, so congratulations to him, and the new First Lady, Irene Johnson. Also, the Atlanta Business League recognized the top 100 women of influence this week, so congratulations to them, and you can find that list on the Business League website. And then Tommy Ford, the actor from Martin, passed. He was living here in Atlanta, had an aneurysm, and died. So unfortunate. And Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for
What a
Literature.
joke.
Look at that. And then,
Further adulterization of our culture.
well, okay, and one more. Ingrid Saunders Jones and Janice Mathis of the National Council of Negro Women. They had a successful national convention in Washington, D.C., and they have rebuilding the organization and continuing that good
You're
work.
taking Jeff's time, Alexis.
I did, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Say Michelle Obama.
Winner is Kevin Ross, who was embroiled in the controversy surrounding the CEO in DeKalb County. He won an $11 million judgment against 2 of his accusers, further proving that he was an innocent man.
Wow.
And Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, has got to be the loser. Hopefully he's going to be a loser in the water wars thing, but he certainly was when he tried not to extend the voter registration deadline for people who have been obviously impacted by the hurricane.
Disagree with you. We got to get out. I will make as my winner Brian Snitker. He's going to be the full-time manager of the Braves. You can bet he gets at least a season. And the Falcons today against Seattle. Hope we can continue that winning streak against good teams. They're the late game this afternoon on Fox, 4:25 kickoff. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program